Welcome to the Zen Run podcast. I am so glad you're here. Each week we dive into the real, raw and often unexpected journeys of everyday runners. Because every runner has a story and every story has the power to inspire. If you've got a running story of your own, whether you're just lacing up for the first time or you're deep into your ultra journey, I'd love to hear it. Sharing your experience might be just the thing that someone else needs to get out the door. And hey, if you're looking for a bit of motivation or just want to keep your running fun and stress-free, check out Zen Run. It's a relaxed space with guided runs, simple training plans, and monthly challenges to help you stay consistent without the pressure. All right, let's jump into this week's story. It's a good one. Today's guest is someone I've admired for decades, Lee Troop, a 3-time Olympian, a fierce competitor, and now a proud dad running for joy. We talk about everything from running around the block with his dad, to chasing Deke's records, to finding peace in a slower pace, and his new event, the Geelong Marathon. It's honest, gritty, and packed with heart. Let's dive in. Today on the Zen Run podcast, I am really excited to introduce you all to Lee Troop. Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Michelle.
I know anyone in Australia who was even mildly interested in running over the last few decades would know your name, and I'm sure people beyond Australia as well. So thank you for jumping on. I'll try not to be too much of a fangirl while I'm talking to you and just treat you like a normal guest. Now, where I always start with everyone is, where did you grow up? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep. So I grew up in a place called Whittington, Geelong. So it was like a subdivision area to the east of Geelong. So it was a commission house area. And I'm the oldest of 6 kids and got involved in running just because my dad wanted to lose weight. So he was a guy that worked at Alcoa in the ingot mill, and he'd been a smoker and a drinker and just decided to make some life changes. And it coincidentally coincided when Robert De Castella was running at that time in the early 80s. So he sort of had a legend to grasp onto. And it was also around the same time that we in Australia launched the Life Be In It program. So it was, commercials on TV about, overweight norm, drinking and not eating healthy, and how we, didn't want to have sedentary lifestyles and that we needed to improve. So a lot of primary schools then implemented these programs that included, like sit-ups and running and things like that. So I was just fortunate at the time that I wanted to follow my dad around with running. We lived in as I said, a commission house area. So I think it was a great way for my father to keep me active in something positive and not get led astray. And it just started from there.
That's great. How old were you at that point when you started sort of following your dad around?
Yeah, I was probably around about 10. I was also playing Australian rules football and in the winter and cricket. And, I was a typical Aussie kid. But just something was more, there was a deeper relationship with my father when it came to running as it did to playing under 10 or under 12 football, because obviously he couldn't play. So, heading out for a run with him. So he would have worked like a 10-hour day at Alcoa in the ingot mill, and he'd come home at like 4 o'clock, tired, but he'd be like, I'm going for a run. And the estate where we lived was about 3 kilometres around. And so I would tag along with him, and I loved running. I loved beating him, despite the fact that he was tired and on weary legs. And and then, as I said, the program of the Life Be In It started. And so for every kilometre that you ran, you got a certificate. So I would run before school and at lunchtime and after school just to accumulate all these certificates that I would colour in and put in a scrapbook that I still have, or that my mum has kept. And then, as I said, Robert De Castella came around. So then fun runs started. And so we started to see a big uptick in fun runs. And so I would tag along with my dad to do them. So it was a very organic introduction to running that I had.
Did you talk to your dad while you were running? I know because you said you were racing him a bit. So I wondered, were you actually talking while you're running?
Nah,
it was more of a...
No.
Quick, let's how quick we can get around.
It was very competitive. The troop boys were very competitive, and because my dad was overweight, and he was obviously he'd put some lifestyle changes in, so he was dieting, and back then there was a big diet called the Pritikin diet, which eliminated all fats and everything was steamed, and so he was making a conscious effort. But because of his fitness level and his age, and of course us being so young, we could talk, but there was no way that he could. But we always, we'd sort of run together because, you'd have a lot of street crossings, and we'd get about 400 metres from home, and then it would just be a mad dash sprint back to our letterbox to see who had bragging rights for that. But, the cool thing is that, my father would lose weight, and as he lost weight, he got fitter and he got stronger and he got faster. And then for us, we obviously created a passion and a love for something that far extended through running. It was the quality time of being able to spend that with my dad because of work and every other commitment he had. We didn't really get a lot of that time together.
When you were, racing around, were your siblings with you? Like you said, you're the oldest of 6. Or did you all come out?
Yeah, just the next brother.
Okay.
Yeah, my brother Ricky and myself. So the others were just way too young.
Okay, fair enough. That's pretty cool. How did that reflect in your running at school? Did you enjoy running as a result, or was it still not so much fun?
No, I loved running.
Of course.
I've loved running my whole life. Like even when I was an elite athlete, cranking out 200 and 250 Ks a week, I've loved it. I've always had a passion for it. But, there's certainly been times where all of a sudden running has become a grind and it's not as lovable and it's, you're not as passionate. And for me, I was very lucky in my early years because, I went through that phase. I loved running at school and I loved running with my dad and things were great, but I still wanted to play football. And then, football was my thing. I thought I was going to be playing for Geelong in the VFL at the time. And then I just got to a point where, I needed a break from football. So I went back into running. And then I decided that, I don't want to run. I'm going to do some football umpiring. And then I was like, I'm going to do some triathlon. And then I did some cycling. And then I'd always keep coming back to running. So I played cricket, there was always things to come back to. So I wasn't someone where you see today where kids are doing little athletics and senior athletics and they're training 4 times a week. That really wasn't my life. Running with my dad wasn't training. It was just an aerobic 3-kilometer run that we would do. And then I had all these other sports that I did. So running didn't really become something that I was super passionate about and that I thought that I could possibly be really good at it until I was 18.
Okay. I know a lot of people, when I ask on the podcast what was running like for you at school, even though they're on the podcast because they're adults and they love to run, they say, oh, I hated it. It's interesting. I've had a few people though. I loved running at school as well. So it is interesting, but most people didn't seem to really like it. And I think maybe it's the way it's set out or has been set out at school. Sometimes it's used as punishment as well for different things you might do at school or in sports training of other sports. So it's just interesting the way different people have come through that process and what it meant for them. And as you said at the start, maybe your dad and going out and doing that and it becoming that kind of experience or that kind of activity really changed that for you. So it didn't make it that thing that they made you do at school, even if you didn't want to.
Well, weirdly, that was quality time. Going out there and running for 15 minutes was quality time. But there was also these things that you were rewarded for what you did. So each time you ran and you hit a milestone, you received this certificate that you could colour in. And I don't know, you were rewarded for it. And we come from a poor area, so there weren't a lot of people running. I'm sure 99% of the people in our area hated running. But for me, I enjoyed it. It was an outlet. It was something I could challenge myself on. I didn't have the greatest upbringing, so something that I could put a little bit more fire and anger into seemed to be running. And I certainly bore the fruit of it in the latter years.
Were you good at it at school? Like when you did do your sports carnivals and your cross countries and things like that? What was that like?
Yeah, well, there's levels of being successful, right? So at my school level, I was successful because not a lot of people ran. And then when I ran at like a Geelong level, I was competitive. But as each of the stages went up from, local to Western Zone country to the state championship, every year was a challenge to get better. So like in year 7, I only got as far as the Geelong schools cross country. I didn't make it to the Western Zone. So the Western Zone is like the state was broken up to Northern Zone, Eastern, Western and Southern Zone. And Geelong was in the Western Zone. So then the following year I made it to the Western Zone, but I didn't go beyond that. And then year 9, I made it from the Western Zone to the state championships. And then it was in year 10 that I made the national championships, which was up in Brisbane in 1988. So every year I got to a certain level, but there were other kids that were way better than me. Like they had coaches, they were training every day. Like I ran with my dad and I made up my own training. Like I didn't have my first coach until I was like 18. Wow. We read a lot of the Robert De Castella books, jog with Deke, race like Deke, eat like Deke, everything was Deke. Correct. Like my dad bought the Adidas Boston shoes, and of course I got the Dunlop K26s. But and I remember I wanted to run a marathon at 14, and then a lot of people. My dad was running in this thing called the Geelong Professional Cross Country Club, and all these people were like, "No, like your son cannot run a marathon. Like it'll destroy him." And so my dad was like, okay, well, I don't think you can run a marathon. But he also had a rule that I couldn't do a fun run unless I had trained for the month leading into it. So it wasn't like I didn't do any running and then I was just like I was going to do a 10K fun run. He would be like, if you want to do this fun run, you have to run for a month. And my dad was an army man. So like you knew that like he was a hard worker and he wouldn't expect anything less from his kids. And I just seemed to thrive on that. Like I'd get up at 5 a.m. and go swimming with him, and we did bike riding, did some triathlon, like had an array of a lot of things that I did. And probably a lot of that didn't really hit me as far as the impact went until he passed away in November of 23. And you sort of like sit there and you reflect on a number of things. And, as I said, I had a really tough upbringing, and, I don't think I had probably the best of upbringings, but when I look at a lot of the silver linings in, particularly where I am as a person, my thought processes, what I strived for, I definitely believe that a lot of that come from the drive and the challenge that my father presented with me.
That's beautiful. I love that. Academically, what was school like for you academically, Lee? Well, I don't think you're dumb.
Dumb. I was a kid that got through with doing the bare minimum. School wasn't my thing. I craved sports. Like I said, I wanted to be a footballer, and then I was a runner, and I found education hard. I was the class clown. I was the one that provided the entertainment. I wouldn't necessarily say it was attention seeking, but it was also good to garnish a lot of attention by just being humorous. So, I got my year 12 education. I scraped through by the end of my nails. But then that sort of presented then an opportunity for me to go to a junior college in the US, South Plains College. And my grades weren't good enough to go to NCAA school. I even took the SATs, and they were pretty ordinary.
So at that point, why were you wanting to go? Sorry to interrupt. Why were you wanting to go to America at that point?
There was no opportunities here in Australia.
So you were wanting to go over there for running was going to take you over there at that point? So you would have been about 17, 18?
It was a running scholarship. So you basically go to a university, they pay for your education, and you return the favour by competing for the school. So, so I'd got this opportunity to head over to the US, and I wasn't going to go because I figured, you know what, I'm going to be a runner. I even drove up to Ballarat to meet with Steve Moneghetti, and he was like, you don't want to go to America. That's a very high attrition rate, you know, a lot of burnout. You know, if you're going to be successful, you need to stay here. And anyway, just as luck presented itself, a few things sort of fell apart, and I was just like, what have I got to lose by going to America? So I flew to this school in the panhandle of Texas, and I didn't know the difference between NAI, junior college, NCAA, Division 1, 2, 3. I mean, we didn't have iPhones back then, and a Jacaranda Atlas doesn't really tell you what the panhandle of Texas is going to look like. And so I was going to go, and then I decided I didn't want to go because I was listening to the advice of Steve Moneghetti. And then my mum was discouraged. She was just like, this is a great opportunity for you to further your running and also your education. You know, because running is not going to pay the bills, and you need something to fall back on. Of course not. And yeah, correct. I mean, mum's words, right? And so I decided I wasn't going to go. And then, as I said, a few things sort of at that time didn't go my way. And then I thought, oh, what have I got to lose? So I flew to America, and I landed in the panhandle of Texas. There's nothing there. It's as remote as you can get. Wow. And I had a one-way ticket. And so I called my parents after about 5 days, and I said to them, you know, this is not working out. I want to come home. And my mum said to me, we knew you were going to do this, and you're there for a minimum 6 months, and hung up.
Wow. Go, Mum.
So I didn't get my return ticket. Yeah. I eventually flew back after a year and a half. And, you know, I think a little bit of that tough love definitely set the foundations for me being an international athlete, because if you could make it in the panhandle of Texas, you could make it anywhere around the world.
So how did you make it there in that panhandle of Texas?
Well, look, I made a lot of mistakes early on. You know, you trust a lot of people. You're an Australian. They'd never had an Australian in the panhandle of Texas. So I was an asset. I was a commodity. So you sort of get used and abused by certain people, and you've just got to learn the hard parts. And being over there, you're so far removed from your family. Like, we've just seen the punter at the University of Nebraska have this emotional press conference about being away from his family and crying. And, you know, I sort of look at that, and it was hard, right? I mean, I wasn't put on a stage with a microphone and a camera there where, you know, those emotions would happen. But you do. Like, at 18, you've got a lot of friends. You've got your friends you go to school with. You've got your sports friends. You're popular. So, you know, you've had a girlfriend. You've paved the way, and then you end up in this very small town with no friends, no family. You can't work. So each holiday break, you'd have to go home with a family. So you'd obviously befriend people to go home with them. And I don't know, it was a challenge, but it was definitely something that my father had definitely instilled in me and worked on me with. And I just had to dig deep and grit the teeth. And, you know, through that, I would say, adversity of trying to survive and navigate at 18 years of age on my own in Texas, it certainly allowed, as I traveled the world, to see everything as an adventure. It wouldn't matter where I landed. I could work out the public train system. I could work out the bus system. I could travel from Heathrow to Gatwick. I could get all over Europe. I could get all over the US. And I do think that hardness of having to survive on my own definitely was the catalyst of then making sure that when running became my career, that I actually could survive on my own, because a lot of the training and the places that you go to and the races that you go to, you're on your own. So I definitely think that was a great foundation for me.
That's amazing. What did you study? So you went to America. Studying like a running scholarship. So what were you studying?
I started with kinesiology, and then I came back home after a year and a half. I wanted to make the Olympics in Atlanta. And so I came home early. That was my goal. I started university twice since then, and I've completed no degree. I've got a degree in the School of Hard Knocks, but a lot of life experiences, which is crazy. I own my own business. I'm a race director. We're putting on a huge marathon in Geelong.
I know.
You know, it's a $1.5 million event. But I've done all this without actually having a university degree, which is pretty crazy.
What were the other ones you started? So you got kinesiology?
So I did kinesiology, and then I did human movement at the University of Ballarat, and then I did a bachelor's degree at Deakin University. It was going to be business marketing.
Well, you'd never say never. If you want to do it at any time, you still can. Because you said you haven't. If you ever feel driven to do it, don't have to either. But you can always go back to it.
Well, my daughter's actually doing a Bachelor of Communication at Deakin University, and I laughed. And I said, don't be surprised if I end up being a lecturer in one of your classes, because that's where I seem to be these days, is like talking to students about, pathways of success. But as I said, the irony is I don't have a university degree, but there's definitely something to be said for, as I said, the school of hard knocks and learning the hard way, the different way, the old-fashioned way. And, I think I would be going back to university not to learn anything, but just to be able to get a certificate to put on my wall to prove that all these years later I could actually get a degree.
And it's just be like your personal thing. It's not to prove anything to anyone else. Literally just for a personal achievement, satisfaction type of thing. We've always taught our kids that you don't need to go to university if you can do what you want to do without doing it. That's also fine. It's not you have to go to university to make it in whatever you want to do in life. There's plenty of examples where that's not actually the case, no matter what school tells you. Anyway, not that this is an anti-school.
No.
There you go. It's interesting. All right. So you came home and because you wanted to try out for the Olympics. And do you need to live in it? Explain, I don't know anything about that kind of level of running particularly. Do you need to be in the country a lot that you're going to represent before you go on? I know you've got to run races to get chosen and all that kind of stuff. Explain a little bit about how that process works for us.
Yeah, so it's obviously a lot different now, so I won't worry about discussing now because I don't think anyone around the world truly knows how the World Athletics points system works. Yeah. But way back in the day, it used to be you had national championships and whoever finished in the top three, provided they had the times, would be considered for selection. There'd also be athletes that would already be pre-selected. So someone that's shown outstanding form, has been exceptional at the highest levels, like maybe someone that was a potential medalist or a finalist from the previous World Championships or Olympics would be pre-selected, and then everyone else would be fighting for those spots. So the national championships would be, if you had the time and you finished in the top one or two, you would be considered for selection. So I came home primarily because in order to be successful, you have to take the best athletes on. So I was just racing college athletes. I was racing 26-year-old Kenyans, 19-year-old kids that have come out of high school. You'd go back home and you'd be racing the likes of Pat Carroll, Robert De Castella, Steve Moneghetti, Paul Arthur, Julian Painter, David Evans. And so you got to throw yourself, if you want to be considered, you've got to throw your hat in the ring. So I flew home to make a mark and just basically see what I could throw against the wall and what would stick. And I wasn't successful in making the Olympics in 96, but it definitely set up the pathway of my career because I moved to Ballarat. I started training with Steve Moneghetti. I started to learn what it truly took to be an elite athlete. And the sacrifices that you need to make in order for that to happen, the commitment, the dedication that's required, how training is one metric and racing is a separate metric, and the two are completely different. And, there were just a lot of things that, I learned in that process, but then training with someone that was as good as Steve, it allowed me that as I could see the proof in my performance by improving in my training. So rather than being a minute behind in a training workout, I could narrow that down to 30 seconds. I could narrow that down to 15 seconds. Then I could be competitive with him. Then I could, maybe finish a stride ahead of him. Maybe I could then get 30 seconds. So there was this process of I knew that if I could be competitive with him in training, that would help in my racing. But then that's where the next fold part comes. And that is, just because you're good at training doesn't mean you can race well. And a lot of people are great trainers, but then the pressure and the stress of then having to race and perform becomes a completely different beast. So then I had to learn that, because I could then beat Steve in training, but then he would beat me in racing, and I could never work out why. It was just a completely different mindset. And, so that whole process of training with him twice a day, every week, 52 weeks of the year for the 5 years that I lived in Ballarat, allowed me to learn a heck of a lot. And it was just another stepping stone on what I'd already learned from being in the US, which was another stepping stone on what I'd learned at high school and running with my dad. So everything ended up being a case of the glass was half full with everything that I did. There was always more, there was positives. Like the glass was never half empty in that approach. So I was very fortunate that Steve liked me, and I was able to get into the fold with him and just learn from the best and challenge myself to be better by chasing what the benchmark was that he set, because obviously that's what he was striving for, and I was chasing him, and it ended up being a match made in heaven for me.
It's interesting that running is such a simple sport, a simple activity that I truly believe we all should do, pretty much, most of us who have the capacity to move our bodies in that way, that we're kind of made to do that. And yet, as you described it there's, when you want to compete at a high level, there's this layers and layers of complexity to master the sport when you want to make your body as efficient as possible in order to achieve the goals that you're after when you're running in races. So it's the way you explained it then, it sounded like you never, like, do you think you ever got to that full mastery, or do you think it was there's always more that you could find?
I think there's always more. Like, things change, and I guess when you ask like what's more, like, is more winning an Olympic gold medal? Is it being in the top 10? Is it breaking 2:10 for the marathon? Like, everyone's metric is completely different. So then that also determines the effort and the work ethic that you have. I was always after more. I even got to a point that, the Sydney Olympics didn't go well, but I spent the rest of my career chasing a ghost that wasn't there. The ghost was me. I was chasing this process of dissatisfaction and non-fulfillment. And it's sad in a way, because I achieved so many great things, but I was never content. I was never happy. I never celebrated it. And then years go by and you're being acknowledged for things, and you're like, don't know if really you should be patting me on the back for that. And it took a whole unearthing experience. It took like we hear the story of the onion, right? It took shredding back the layers and the layers and the layers to get to the core for me to then go, wow, I actually achieved some amazing things, some things that I never, ever really gave myself credit for, which is a crying shame.
Other people's eyes.
It also, but it also just showed the makeup of me. And, we're all wired different. I know that I was a much better coach because I was able to coach athletes the way I should have coached myself. And I learned a lot. Like, we're always learning. But as I said, looking back on my career, and it was like a long, long time after that I was just like, man, that's really sad that I never in the moment enjoyed it. I always thought there was more, and I guess I didn't want to feel that I was celebrating something, because then that would mean I was content. And then that would mean that I wasn't hungry.
There, that you're
like,
there.
I always come home hungrier. Yeah.
I know.
So it was like, okay, great. I did something cool, celebrated it, but now let's get back to the next thing and just keep working. And as I said, I try to get my athletes, when things aren't great, to take time to, work on themselves, work out what's going wrong, what they need to do to be better. Don't train harder and punish yourself, because it's only going to make it worse, because that's what I did. But then when you have success, enjoy the moment, pat yourself on the back, celebrate it with friends. You've made lots of sacrifices. I did that for a short period, and then I was straight into training, going, all right, if I did that here, imagine if I trained harder. and that's when I went from like doing 180, 200 Ks a week to 250 Ks a week. And then I started training 3 times a day because I felt that if I did that, then I would improve even more on the success that I had, and I didn't.
I don't want to skip way ahead because I'd love to talk a little bit about your career and some of the amazing achievements that you did so we can celebrate them here. It just reminded me of something we talk about on the podcast occasionally, and that is you don't actually know. That was my fastest 10 that I'm ever going to run, because now I'm like I'm 56 and my fastest marathon was like in my early 40s. But at that time, I didn't have that. You don't know. It's kind of, it's even, I think, more visceral perhaps for you guys who are really competitive, that you don't ever know when you get, well, I don't think you know. Do you? Do you know, did you know that, okay, I've reached the peak of what I'm physically going to be able to do? And then you, as you kind of described a minute ago, you end up chasing it, but it's that maybe that's the ghost you're talking about. It's that.
You chase the ghost of your former self. And even when I was 40, I still thought I was going to run as fast as what I did when I was 26. But that was my driving force. Like, that's what motivated me. Like even when I was 40, I was still as dedicated as what I was when I was 26. And I was still applying everything, but my body was old. I was breaking down, and it required more physical therapy. It required more massage. It required more stretching. And then there was more pressure. But I still had that same selfish, driven attitude that I could still get better. Yes. And the reality is that I wasn't. Yeah. Maybe at that time when the super shoes come around and I was wearing them at 40, it might have brought me a little closer, but I did not age gracefully, which then added more frustration because you then start to realize it's not going to happen. And all these things you've been chasing for 20 years, the one goal I had was to break Dick's record, and it wasn't going to happen. And then you end up becoming extremely disappointed in yourself. And that's what overrides the success that I had. Like when I broke Clarkie's record, I mean, it should have been one of the greatest things that I should pat myself on the back for, because it stood for 33 years, but I didn't. I was like, no, I've got Dick's record. I'm going to keep working. And I spent a whole lifetime being driven and challenging myself and getting the best out of myself. And I did. Could I have got more? Probably, if I had a different attitude, but I was wired that way. And it was always going to take a very special person to figure me out, which no one really could.
That's interesting. I'd love to dig into that some more. But first, I actually want to go back and talk a little bit about your career. Tell us how it unfolded for those of you who haven't looked at your Wikipedia and other things. Tell us a little bit about.
Look, I guess
that part.
It sort of unfolded. We talked about school at each level I got to, and then by the end of year 11, 12, same thing sort of happened when I became a professional athlete. So when I flew home from America to try and make the Olympics in 96, I didn't make the Olympics in 96 because Christmas of 94, I was assaulted and I ended up in hospital with a broken jaw and a blood clot on my brain. Shit. And that ended basically my campaign in 95 to run.
Didn't know
so I was behind the 8 ball trying to get going, but realistically, my back was to the wall to make it, even if I hadn't have had that incident. So 96 was all about winning things at state. So I won like the state cross country champs, the state 10K champs. But then when I went to the national level, I struggled. The pressure I put on myself, I failed. So then 97 was a stepping stone that, I could win the state titles again because I'd already done that. But then I won City to Surf and I won my first national 10K title that then got me qualified for the Commonwealth Games. So then it got me to then go to the Commonwealth Games. And then the following year was the World Championships and the following year was the Olympics. So everything just kept building. I was uninjured. I was competitive with my training with Mona. And that's what Mona will tell you. Like, Mona honestly feels that he got an extra 4 years out of himself because of the competitiveness that he and I had in training. Like, we were competitive and we just got the best out of each other. Like, there were times that we had blow-ups, right? I mean, that's what happens with two competitive men with juices flowing. But you would get to a point where you'd be having a coffee the next day and you just laugh about it, go like, what the hell are we doing? We're meant to be friends, right? So all those little things led to that. And then, of course, once I made the Sydney Olympics, the rest of my career then, obviously, the success I had, with my marathons at 209 and making 2 more Olympics and world cross countries and all those things were really just a process of the work having already been done. I just had to maintain what I was doing, keep pushing the training to get quicker. I always had these goals, so I was striving for these goals, and when I fell short of those goals, it motivated me even more. And as I said, even when I was 40, I still was like that. So it was a whole process. And so a lot of people see the success, but then they don't see what I was doing 10 years earlier. And the 10 years earlier was like not getting injured, doing my training, keeping the training simple, getting physical therapy and massage and looking after my body, getting the rest that I needed, but more importantly, enjoying it. Like I said before, that I love the challenge, and so for me, that's what I loved, like everything being hard and competitive was what I thrived on. And that was probably my upbringing with my dad. I never wanted anything easy. I wanted it. I wanted to deserve it. I didn't want it given to me. And, they're all the things that just kept working away. And I think also too, what helped me was that I wasn't a competitive athlete when I was younger, this was all just done through love. I was like a Kenyan that was just running like 80 to 100 Ks a week when he was like 14, 15, up to like 160 when I was already 18. But it was like the Kenyans. I ran because I love it. It was just a lot of volume. It wasn't a lot of intensity. And I think that just helped me cardiovascularly and helped with my skeletal structure of strengthening it subtly. And it set me up. But the mind was definitely 3 times stronger than the body. I was just driven to always get the best out of myself. And if I didn't feel like at the end of the race that I had given my very best, then that would upset me even more.
So you were your worst critic. That's what you've been saying
Yes.
about a lot of this.
Yep, definitely so.
What are you most proud of with your running career?
I guess that's a bit of an open-ended question because as I reflect on some of my success, there's also been some disappointing moments that were turning points in my career. I'm definitely proud of the fact that, I broke Clarkie's record. I mean, that's a given. Running 209 at London and going through halfway in 63 minutes, what? They're just things that, 99.9% of people are always just going to dream about. And I got to do it. But, when I look at something like the Sydney Olympics, 4th at halfway, running the race of my life, and then I tore my stomach muscle at 23K. The trauma and the torment that I went through just to finish definitely was not my proudest moment at the time. I was embarrassed by it, and it took me 10 years to get over that. But when I look at it now, the driving force for that was that Steve Moneghetti had told me that the marathoners have a tradition, and that is that if you're going to be running at a major championship wearing the Australian uniform, if you're going to DNF, you have to take it off and leave it on the side of the road. You're not worthy of wearing it. And so I was driven to finish. And I remember in certain parts, I don't remember the crowd and the noise, and then in other parts I do. And, I don't really remember finishing, and then how I ended up at the athletes' village is just a whole nother sad tale in itself. But that moment was a moment of pride, personal pride, that I wore the Australian singlet, and I didn't quit. And that was something that I always prided myself on every time I wore that uniform, and also the standard that was set for the next generation of marathoners to know that that's the power of the green and gold. And I'm proud of the fact that I didn't quit. I mean, I was mentally tough. And again, I was more worried about in that situation of the glass being half empty than being half full, because it was an amazing achievement. And if I had just given myself a bit of a moment to reflect on that, appreciate that, I don't think the rest of my career would have had me chasing what I was chasing, which inevitably I never caught.
Is there a healthy way? Like, I speak to a lot of, we call them weekend warriors, everyday runners on the podcast. I have had a few Olympians and stuff as well. So people who are driven by, being faster all the time and trying to achieve those kind of goals. Is there a way to be at that kind of level? And maybe this is in any sport, but certainly in running, and do that healthily? Like that thing that we've been describing? Because we all have it. Like even most of us who are runners and have been running for any length of time, we can be competitive in our own little bubble against the people we run against, but it's what drives us to keep wanting to go faster and further and all that kind of stuff. Is there a healthy way to have that drive? Because some of it is what gets us out the door. Anyway.
I think it's a yes and no answer. Look, I spoke to psychologists when I was young, like the head coach was like, we think you need to speak to someone. They couldn't work me out. No one could work me out. I got the best out of myself and I had the career that I had because of my makeup. Yeah. It's as simple as that. Could I have got more had I been softened around the edges and, we worked on some different things? Absolutely. But mentally and emotionally, that was not me. And potentially, had I gone down that path, it might have softened me up to the point where all of a sudden I was too busy worried about my feelings, right? And all of a sudden, little things became big things. And then you start questioning, I don't want to run today because I've got a cold and, it's probably going to be better for me if I don't. I mean, I ran 1,000 days without a day off, right? I did all these hard things because that was my makeup. That was my mental component. And when 100 people stand on the start line of the Olympics, they're all different. They've all got there in different ways. Like there's no one right way. There's multiple ways. And I found the right way for me at the time. Could it have been different and I got the same result or even a better result? Possibly. It might have been a worse result, but I don't look back on things and go, oh, if only I'd changed that or if only I'd done this, because I feel like that then is making excuses for where you are. Like I've lived by the sword, I die by the sword. So for me, it is what it is. I got the best out of myself. My results are what they are. There's some great results. There's some good results. There's some solid results and there's some bad results. But I can sit here in front of you and viewers and listeners and tell you that I got the best out of myself every single time. And it might not have been the result that I was hoping for or the result that other people expected. But when I stepped across that finish line, I had nothing left to give. Could preparation have been better? Yep. Could just my attitude been better? Yep. But where I was at the time, that was the best I could give. So as I said, going into coaching, I take now a lot of that mental side of things, the emotional side of things. Most elite runners are very emotional. And I was very emotional. And it's like getting them to be able to differentiate between what's fact and what's fiction, what's reality and what's not reality, what can you control, what can you not control, and give them confidence within themselves that as we're making decisions, we're not making decisions for tomorrow, which is what I did. I made decisions for tomorrow. It was in about 6 months' time. We're making decisions for the next 6 months, the next year, the next Olympic cycle. And whatever decision we make today could have ramifications in that athlete not getting there. Yeah. And so I'm a lot more cautious as a coach. Now, I just didn't have anyone that spoke my language as an athlete. If I could have found that yin with my yang, it possibly would have helped. And I would have had complete trust and faith in them. But then it also comes down to trust issues, right? Like I didn't trust anyone. Yeah. Having that, and I feel like that as a coach, I'm giving to the table what I really probably should have had as an athlete. And I think that's what's made me a great coach. Training's training. Everyone trains differently. Yeah. People train hard. People cross-train. There's all different ways to train, but it's the emotional side, the psychological side that really is the difference at that level. And that's the thing that I got right on days. And it was also things I didn't get right on days because I didn't have balance in my approach. It was all or nothing.
I found on reflection, because I've run all of my life since school, that there's seasons as well. Like there are seasons in my running career where it feels weird saying that to you, but there are seasons in my running career where I've been competitive and seasons where I just run because I love to run, and it's not about the times and it's not about, you know, all the other stuff. Or I often have a goal or a race that I'm training for, but it's not. You have different reasons. They change, so but often we don't realize that until we step back, that you were talking about earlier, and look back at what we've done, and we realize that it's not always the same in our running career and why we're doing what's driving us. And I guess that's what you've also found when you look back at your running career and what it was like when you were really competitive and what it's like now. And I know we'll get into that in a minute to talk about what your running's like at the moment. But yeah, we do.
And that's the difference between the everyday runner and the elite runner.
Exactly.
Right? Like
very different.
You have the flexibility. Like you've made the choice. You can either be on or off. It's seasons.
It's not a job.
The elite athletes don't get that. You have a track season, and you have a road season, you have a cross-country season. You might have a bit of downtime. You've got sponsors. There's prize money you're racing for. Like
pressure.
You don't get that. Like you're on all the time. And you said before I was my own worst enemy, and I was. But being in a different phase of life now, the choice to run or not run is completely different from the choice I had back then. But I wasn't forced to do it. I did it because I loved it, right? Even the days I didn't want to get out the door, it was still a challenge for me to be able to say, hey, don't be pathetic. Like, get out that door. Like I always said when I looked at myself in the mirror, it would scare the living daylights out of me because I'm not a good-looking fella. But I also want to see the reflection back at me as a guy that lives every day to the best of his ability, always gives the best of himself. And it might not be up to the level that I would expect, but it's up to the level that I can give. And giving, like if you're sick, you can't race at the top of your game, right? They're two different worlds. But if you're sick, you can still give 100% of whatever energy level you've got. And that energy level might only be 50% compared to when you were a good athlete. So attitude is everything. It's giving 100% of your attitude, regardless of where you are physically. That was the most important for me.
I love that. How long was your competitive running career?
So I went to the US in 93. I had already won the Australian Junior Championships in 92. I was runner-up in 91. So probably 91 as a junior, bottom-end junior, and then top-end 92. And I went all the way through till 2014. 2014. So I retired professionally in New York Marathon 2014.
How was it to make that decision?
So it's at 25 years or something. I didn't really have much of a choice. I had a number of blood clots at that point on my lungs, and so running was getting hard to do. I'd also been at Boston Marathon the year before, which was the bombings, and just a lot of things changed for me at that time. I was sort of getting to the point where I was just like, I think, I might just want to run. And, I'd had aspirations to be a Masters runner. And I'd won Boston in 2013. I won the Masters. I was like 11th overall as a 40-year-old. And I was like, I'm going to keep running until I'm 50. And then the bombings happened, and it just sort of changed just a lot of my perception of life and how vulnerable we are, and then how much we need to appreciate. And I just sort of went through a myriad of emotions. I was living in the US at the time. And so then I decided, all right, I'm going to do one more year. Training was hard. I couldn't train hard. I couldn't race hard. I felt like with the blood clots, I'd gone from being like something with 5 gears to 4 gears. And then with my age, I was slowly starting to move to 3 gears. And giving 100% was frustrating for me because, I'd be out there running a 32-minute 10K when I'm like, I know I can break 30 minutes. And it was really hard at that time to accept that something like a blood clot could have damaging effects. Like I had my first one in 2010. I had a significant one in 2014 where I lost like about 10% of my lung capacity just at that time. And it just, became tough. And so then I wasn't enjoying my running as much. So, I sort of took a break, but then I was coaching. So then I was running with the athletes. So I could still run. I was still fairly fit. And but competitively, November 2014 was the last time I actually saw myself as a professional athlete. Now, I did run another competitive marathon in 2018, and that was done off only about 8 weeks training, but I ran in honour of an athlete of mine that committed suicide who was supposed to be running the LA Marathon, and I ran like 2:31 and finished 10th. Not a lot. But I ran that on just sheer anger and emotion. I definitely went to the well in that run. And then that sort of then set the catalyst up of another blood clot. And anyway, I was like, I'm overrunning.
Why do the blood clots happen? Is it I don't know. I don't know.
It's not hereditary. Doctors don't know. It's just random. I have my own theories that, I think age plus altitude, because obviously at altitude you're less oxygen. You don't recover as well. You're always pushing yourself, and there's a lot more exertion on you aerobically. And then combine, dehydration because you're at altitude, and then travel. So they're sort of my own guesses. But I went from having nothing, and then I moved to the US, and then all of a sudden I started getting them.
When did you move to the US? Again?
2009.
And you went up to
Boulder, Colorado, 2009. Yeah. So I've been at altitude the whole time.
And why did you go to Boulder? I mean, I know there's a running community there.
It is. Robert De Costello lived there, and he was just like, you talked before about, ebbs and flows of running and when it's good and when it's not. And I was just getting a bit frustrated with Europe, and he said, why don't you go to Boulder? He'd lived there for 10 years. So in 2002, I made the trek across to check it out rather than going to Europe, and I loved it. And so I came back again in 2003 and then decided to move here in 2009.
Wow. And set up a bit of a business there eventually once you're running.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, correct. I mean, so I fell into coaching. So I've coached a couple of Olympic athletes, and, so we had a running club here. So coaching recreational people, I had like 30, 40 people recreationally, that from first-time marathoners to those that were running 4 hours. And then I had elite athletes. So I had Laura Thweet, ran 225 at London. Wow. Jake Riley, who made the Olympics, Sean Quigley, who ran 2750. So that became a big part. And then I had John Gray, who, as I said, unfortunately succumbed to depression in 2018. So sort of had falling into that. I owned a running store for a short period of time, but then got back into race directing. So I've got a portfolio of events from Thanksgiving Day race to St. Patrick's Day to 4th of July, cross-country, track. We put on primary school, which over here we call elementary school, running programs. And so, I went from Boulder not having hardly anything except for the Boulder to a calendar of events that run from March all the way through to November.
That's crazy. So there's a life after running that's in running.
Yeah, I mean, there is if you're passionate about it, and I fell into it and I love it. It's certainly it's become my vice, my fix post-running. But there are a lot of athletes that never find their way after running. Running's been their identity, and they retire and then they really struggle to move into an environment that they're comfortable with. And I'm very lucky that I was fortunate enough to do that. And I think, providing the opportunity for people to do what I've done for a living, whether that's coaching elite athletes to the Olympics or someone doing a local 5K fun run like I did with my dad, I get to experience all the emotions and all the joy. And then the appreciation for what I do makes me feel great as a human being. It means that I'm contributing in a positive way to the world and trying to make the world a better place through health and fitness and connectivity and socialization. And so I go to bed each night very tired, but with a full heart, and feel like that, even though I'm in a different realm than what I was as a competitive athlete, I'm still getting the very best out of myself, which is the most important thing.
So you're coaching now, is that all done in person, or do you do online coaching as well? Just get a little...
No, I've retired from coaching. I'm helping a couple of athletes out, but at the end of 24, I officially retired from all forms of coaching.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just telling everyone out there, sorry, you can't have Lee as a coach now. There you
go. I may come back to it. I found greater joy in coaching the everyday person, like the person that's got 4 kids, the person that's crunching out 50 hours of work. Running is an outlet for them, right? And I love that because I could have fun. Like when people come to training, their life's already stressed. My job's to make it fun and enjoyable and keep them healthy and keep it simple. And we travel to races, we go out for dinner. Coaching the elites is just a different beast. And I've had I've had success with a lot of athletes, but I've had great relationships with some, and I've had unbelievably bad relationships with others. And at that level, you're just part of a process, and if something looks better somewhere else, they're just going to pack up and leave you. If a sponsor tells you, hey, we're going to sponsor you, but we want you to join another group with another coach, regardless of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and, being out there in the snow and at 5 o'clock at night because you can't fit the training in and you're there and traveling to all these races and giving all of yourself, those athletes are selfish and then just move to wherever they can go to because it betters them. And so there's no loyalty. And I just got to a point where I was just like, it's a different world now with your Instagram and your influencers and everyone that wants to put themselves out there, particularly being something that they're not. I just couldn't handle it. And I just got to a point where I was just like, I'm going to take a break. I really value the opportunity that presented itself at the time and the success that I've had and what I learned. But moving forward, for my own mental health, I just can't be someone that turns up just knowing at any given time that if someone provided a better opportunity, regardless of what I've sacrificed and given, I would be discarded and all of what I'd done would be wasted. And then that makes me feel worthless as a person. It makes me feel bad that I've not given my family that time because I've selfishly given it to an athlete that I believe truly wanted to make an Olympics. And as a result, I want to be side by side with them, giving them what they need to achieve that dream. And so when they don't do the right thing by you, it does really make you feel worthless as a person and that you've wasted your time. So I just wanted to take a break. As I said, I've had some great opportunities with athletes and stuff that I'm still friends with them and I will enjoy, having a relationship with them for the rest of my life. And there are some that, I don't want to see the back of them. And that's just being truthful and honest. But as far as coaching recreational people, I'll probably get back into that. But Geelong's got so many groups, it would be criminal of me just because of my name to go back to Geelong and start a group that I know would have some people in those groups leaving because it would sound better to be coached by Lee Troop. Not that I would be better or I'd have a better environment for them, but that's just the way it is. And I don't want to do that to anyone. And I want to support every group that there is in Geelong and have some fun.
So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. One was, you've described your life up to this point and what it's been like, but I know you've also managed to have a family in amongst all of that. How did that happen? How did you manage to have a family when you've got what a busy life? And it's, you described, even especially with the professional career in running, you're quite a selfish sort of thing, or at least that's how you described it. And it's very focused and driven. How do you fit in a normal life outside of that?
So I'm lucky. I have a wife that is from Tasmania. She
Good
We
place.
got set up on a blind date. She was blind drunk. So that's the only way I stood a chance. And anyway, we just hit it off, and she knew what running was. I was very clear that, you know, I would rather be single and chasing my dreams, but if someone wants to come along, then I'm all for it. And anyway, she bought in, and, you know, like, we've been able to travel the world and go to a lot of places. And the funny thing is, when I talk about sacrifice, when someone's coming along with you, it's not a sacrifice, right? Like, it's a journey. It's like there's destinations. Like, you know, she's gone to the Olympics, World Championships. She's traveled to places that she probably wouldn't have thought that she'd be going to. And then, you know, just, I don't have to go into, you know, how we had a family with the birds and the bees, but, you know, like,
I think I know how that happened.
Just decided just wanted to, you know, start a family. And we had a daughter in 2006, and that was an unbelievable experience for me to soften a little bit, because like, when you come home from a hard workout, you've got like this 1-year-old baby that you know, needs their nappy changed, or is crying and just needs to be held, or, you know, your wife's stressed and she needs to get out the door and go for a run, and then you've got to feed and play your part. There was this beautiful angelic part to having the children that really made my life better, without a doubt. Like, I mean, the greatest job I've got is being a dad. I can tell you that hands down. Like, I've done a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats, but being a dad is by far the best. And I've got 3 beautiful children, 2 boys that are 14 and Macy, who's 19. And, you know, ironically, my family has moved back to Geelong, so I'm still in Boulder, Colorado at the moment. I'm backwards and forth. But my kids have known nothing about my running. So in Geelong, we have a section on the river that's called the Troop Loop, and my kids didn't know about that. We have, you know, a Hall of Fame that I'm in. We have a number of prestigious awards named after me. All the teachers at the school know who I am, because they're either old enough where I was still competing, or they were young enough that I actually went and spoke at their school.
Oh, wow.
So they think it's amazing. Like, they've just been opened up to this world of like, oh, my dad was a runner, and my dad's a legend, right? And it's great. And then my daughter Macy, like, because they've lived over here. We've been over here for 16 years. Wow. And so my daughter Macy, like, she's going to uni, and, you know, we were able to speak to a friend to get her in, and, you know, she's got this great job, and every person that goes in there is just like, are you Macy Troop? Like, are you Lee's daughter? And then she's just like, I can't do anything because everyone's going to know that I'm your daughter, and she can't date because, you know, anyone that she speaks to, their parents know who I am. But in saying that, and I'm saying it jokingly, they have been able to see their dad, who has been a coach, a race director, a father, in one part, and then all of a sudden now they're seeing this other side that they were too young to know and appreciate. But also, when I was over here, I never rested on my laurels. I never really talked about my running. It was sort of like, yeah, that's what I used to do. And a lot of people over here don't even know that I've been a 3-time Olympian. They just see me as a race director, or I've got 150 kids that do my primary school coaching, and all the parents turn up thinking I'm the greatest thing in the world because I make it fun for their kids, but they don't know I'm an Olympian. Wow. And I've enjoyed that anonymity. That's allowed me to grow as a person, not rest on my laurels. I'm sure had I lived in Australia, there would have been opportunity to do that. So I've been able to create a completely different identity outside of my running that I'm super proud of, and it makes me feel great as a person that I can contribute in so many different ways. And I've done it without having to use my name or sell myself. I've just done it as someone that's got a hard work ethic that people have appreciated. So heading back to Australia has been a different challenge for me, because I don't want to get stuck in that vortex. I mean, I don't do public speaking anymore. Like, I wanted to just have a life that's for me, and doing this with you is a rarity. And, you know, and I'm very happy to do it. But,
thank you.
You know, when I was an athlete, I was on the road 5 nights a week, sportsman's nights, presenting awards, schools, going to, like, your time as a high-profile athlete is very time-consuming. You've got your training, you've got your recovery, you know, you've got your rest, you've got your travel to races, but then you've got all these other commitments that you've got to give of yourself as a role model. Well, yeah, just as a role model in general, and trying to make your community a better place and to have people admire and respect what you do. So, as I said, moving to America and having anonymity was amazing for me because it just allowed me to challenge myself and work out what I wanted. Going back to Australia has been a challenge for me because, again, people know who I am, and it's exciting for my kids. Like I just love, like deep down, I'm bursting with so much joy. On the outside, I just sort of smile because I don't want them to think that they can get away with dropping my name or it's going to give them any special privileges. But it makes me feel great as a father that they think that this is awesome. And, now that I'm doing a little bit of running, we go down and we run on the Troop Loop, and I haven't run on the Troop Loop, right? Like I've got this part of the river named after me, and to go down there and run with my kids, and they see every K marker that says Troop Loop and there's a big sign, as a parent, it makes me super proud. And so I get to do that with them, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
I love that. I've got to go down there today to catch the Spirit of Tasmania back to Tasmania. I might go for a run.
Okay.
Before I catch the boat. That would be really cool. I love that. So are you going to spend a lot of time splitting your time between America and Geelong, or are you eventually planning to be more in Australia yourself? How's that?
Yeah. So the plan is to come back permanently. My father passed away November 23rd. November 2023. My wife wanted to move back. She'd had enough. And so we sort of tried to come up with this transition phase. Max and Jack were starting grade 7, and also high school is year 7. And so we figured, well, look, if we're going to move back to a country that they've never been in, it's probably beneficial for them to start on day one with 150 new kids. It'll be easier to make friends. Yeah. We also had the challenging part that my daughter was in year 12 and she wasn't graduating until May of 24. And I've been working on this marathon for 7 years in Geelong. And
really? Wow.
It's been one of those ones that, I started in 2018, and it's been a lot of red tape and COVID. And
I've been
so anyway, it was like, all right, let's
about red tape.
Let's look at this transition phase of January 24. Max and Jack will move back and live with my mum. June of 24, Macy and Freya will move back to Australia. I still had athletes trying to make the Olympics. I had athletes that weren't going to make the Olympics, but they were going to retire at New York Marathon in November. And I gave a complete commitment that I would remain in the US during that time to see through their career and also show my respect. I could easily have just packed up and said, no, you're on your own for the last year of your running. But being an athlete, I know how much it means. So I was prepared, again, to sacrifice my family and what I could have done in order to give them what they needed. Yeah. And then we were hoping that the marathon would be up in 2025, and I would be home at the end of 2025. But as it's turned out, the marathon's now not until September of 26. So I will be here until the end of 26. So backwards and forth for this year and next year. And keep working on my events. But the great thing is by continuing to work on them and continuing to build them, it gives me a greater asset to sell. So it's a short-term loss of not being with family, but it's a long-term gain in the long run because everything's so expensive these days. And I don't want my family living at home with my mum for the rest of our lives. So this is a great opportunity for me to be able to sell something profitable and bring something back home for all the hard work that we've done and use that as a deposit on a house.
So how many events have you got in Boulder?
So I have about 10, but they're all small events. Yep. They're all great community events. I started a huge event back in Geelong in 2009 and, won't go into the ins and outs of what happened there. But when I moved to Boulder, I didn't want to do events and they were looking for a race director for a couple of small races. And so I jumped into that. It's one of those things, I obviously still have a love for it. And then we just started creating all these events. And so we have a great following of anywhere from 500 to 1,500. One of our events will be up to 2,000 this year. But great. Working on the Geelong Marathon, that's going to be 10 to 12,000, right? I'm looking at events here that cost me around about $20,000. The Geelong Marathon is going to cost 1.5 million. So they are not in the same stratosphere, but you can't do both, right? You can either do, and I've always loved doing the 10 to 12 small events because it keeps me honest every day. Every month there's a new event. Every time you got to change and pivot. You're constantly working. I do the marketing. I do the website. I'm doing the registrations. I'm out there at 3 a.m. setting up the canopies and I'm marking the course. I do everything because I love it. And I go to bed
busy.
like later that night, so tired that for the next 2 days, I feel like I've run a marathon. My body is smashed.
Yeah.
When you do something like the Geelong Marathon, I'm going to have like a huge amount of people working with me.
It's a different beast,
I can't do any of it. I mean, there's a lot of things they're saying, look, we just don't want you to do this. Like get contractors, like we just want you to be the face of it. My hard work ethic is like, I'm not comfortable with this. Like I have to bleed. I have to get the skin, the calluses on the skins. And I've got to feel like I go to bed that night knowing that I've given everything of myself. So it's challenging for me to say that, this is going to be an easy process, but that's why I still need to keep the American side of things because it'll keep me chiseled while we work through next year's event. And then it'll just give me a great opportunity to be able to say, all right, now this is what I'm going to do. This is the future of the event and where we're going to drive it. We will probably create 2 or 3 smaller events so that I'm constantly working all year, but I'll have definitely sold off America and we'll have closed the chapter there.
Wow. That's very exciting. Having dabbled myself into in race directing, I know all those balls that you have to juggle. It's kind of crazy. And not to mention when there are slightly bigger events or longer, because I've done a few ultra, directing a few ultra trail runs. So it's getting other people involved and then trusting them to do all those other little bits and pieces, which is, nothing compared to what you'll be doing in Geelong. I will put a link to that in the show notes though, so that anyone interested can keep an eye on it, especially on the socials when you're ready to start taking registrations. Because I know a lot of Tassies, not that only Tasmanians listen to. Oh, next month. Okay. Anyway, not that only Tassies listen to the podcast.
We have the media launch on the 17th of September and registrations will open at 7 a.m. on the 21st of September, which is exactly 1 year out. And look, we're looking forward to partnering with Tasmania. We've got the Spirit of Tasmania that docks in Geelong. Brian Lyons is in Devonport and he's talked about how could we partner on certain things. So there's a great opportunity and, we'd love to have you guys come to the mainland and show you our hospitality in Geelong and make you guys realise that the best football team is also Geelong and you can come over and watch them play and do a marathon at the same time.
We're trying to get our own footy team, but I'm sure you know that. Brian's been on the podcast as well, actually. He's great.
Awesome.
He's an amazing guy. What did I want to ask? I was getting very excited about the idea of a marathon over there and where are you going to take that and what that's going to look like for you, because it's that's right. I knew if I rambled I'd remember what I wanted to say. Running, as I said, I wrote a book about running 1,000 years ago, like 20 odd years ago when I first got into online marketing things and I was a runner and it's like it was the thing I did and so it was the next kind of step. Nobody in the running world is buying things then. It was obviously there was a running world, but it wasn't a business making kind of running world. In the last 2 decades, thanks to things I think like Parkrun, I think COVID helped running in many ways because that was one of the few things you could do. But to me, and the question really is, have you seen this as well, or how do you feel this has gone? But running has really exploded in the last, 4 or 5 years, it feels like, for the general population. Have you seen that as well? In America, has that been also
It's global. Like races all over the world are selling out and COVID is the number one reason why running has exploded. No one could go and swim, do team sports. You could go out and walk or run on your own. People realized that they were starting to be unhealthy, being cooped up at home, and they had to do something. And heading out for a walk and running was an easy outlet for them. And then they could measure it, though. They could get on Strava and they could see who else was running in certain areas. Yeah. Even though you couldn't run together, you could see what the king of the point systems were. And there's Map My Run. So we've become very interactive, that even though we were in a very challenging time, we were connected through this social part. Mm-hmm. Then throw in Parkrun, and Parkrun's been amazing. I mean, there's good things and bad things I like about Parkrun, but Parkrun has also been great in getting people that don't really know much about what it takes to put on a road race and can't work out why they can justify spending $50, $100 or $200 for a major event. So they go, well, we'll just do Parkrun. It's free. Like, you go down there, you can run and make friends, do it. And it's been great, because then as they've met more people and learnt more, it's then also transitioned them into the next level of what they can do. Of, oh my God, I just got to run into the MCG, right? I got to experience something that I watch on the TV. So there's definitely those elements. Then look at where we are today socially. We are so twined into our phones, and, you know, from TikToks, Instagrams, you know, Reels, you know, everyone is now putting everything out, and there are so many running groups. Like, there's 20 running groups in Geelong. Like, back in my day, there was 2. Like, I drove my wife down to a Landy Field on a Wednesday, and it was 6 o'clock in the morning. There would have been 100 people, and they were all the demographic. The demographic is crazy. The demographic is basically 24 years of age to 29. That is the demographic. And they're all young, and like, they had a DJ down there. And my wife's like, yeah, that's not for me. I'm not keen on that. And they get around, they do a warm up, they do the workout, and they're running 8 wide on the track, you know, and I'm like sitting there going, oh my God, in my day, the people that were the caretakers, the maintenance workers, would have locked the gate, because you cannot be on the track running 8 wide, making it up for yourself, taking it over, and not paying a permit. Right. Yeah. So perceptions have changed. And then we've got a group that runs on Eastern Beach. We've got a group that runs on the river. We've got the Ocean Grove runners. We've got the Surf Coast Trail runners. We've got the Leopold Coffee Club run. There's all these different people, but they're all connected through the running element, the social part of it. And through COVID, not only did people get fitter because they had to, they also craved connection once we opened the gate. Once we allowed people to be able to get out and mingle, they craved connection. And so now people realize that you don't have to be an elite athlete to run. You know, oh my God, there's such and such on the phone, and she's like, 90 kilograms, and she's out there running in the Zoom Vaporflies, and she runs at like 7 minutes a kilometer, and she's made it sexy. Yeah. And then what happens is that person that's sitting at home, that's got weight issues, that wants to get out there but doesn't think that they can, all of a sudden sees this person, and they're like, no, I'm going to try this. And I'm not a big one on influencers, but I'll give credit where credit's due. They've helped people gain some confidence within themselves to be able to say, well, if you can do it, I'm going to do it.
Just to make
and I think that's pretty amazing too. So if you put all that together, that really shows us why we've seen this boom, why we've seen everyone gravitating towards mass participation events. And I think it's pretty exciting. And, you know, the fact that we're launching this mass participation event next year in Geelong, it's at the right time. And as I indicated to council, if this doesn't happen now, it's never going to happen.
That's so true. The explosion in running events is, for the reasons that you just described so eloquently, is amazing. And I love it, because I do want everyone to be running, pretty much. I don't see why everyone shouldn't be running, for lots of reasons, physical and particularly mental health reasons as well.
Yeah.
Lee, as we wrap it up, because I know I've kept you a little while, what I want to know is what your running looks like now. Because I know you had a break, because I read your thing yesterday. Tell me a bit about it.
It's only
because
you've read my post.
Yeah.
So going through a very dark place in 2018 with the young kid that had committed suicide, and I'd lost a running store, and there was just
lots of shit.
Way too many things to have a Dr. Phil moment. Yeah. the sequence of events was that I was helping a girl, Laura Thweet, get ready for her first race in Chicago. She had osteitis pubis. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to get fit with you. I'm going to run with you every day, So I was getting fit, which was great. But then we had the death of, sorry, let me go back a bit. A friend of mine wanted me to pace him at the Paris Marathon. And then I had the commentary for the Commonwealth Games in that period. But as all these things were evolving, one of my athletes committed suicide. So I had to pivot, and I was like, all right, I'm going to run the marathon. We're going to try to raise $10,000 for the funeral. I'm going to wear his bib. I'm just going to fast track the training and go and do it. So as I told you earlier, I ran 2:30. Like, I went to the well. I ran on so much anger, so much frustration. I hated everyone. I was really hurting to find a reason. And there was also guilt. Like, what did I do? Like, what could I have prevented? How could I have stopped this from happening? I then 6 days later went to Chicago to run this 5-mile race with Laura, and I got smashed in the first mile. Like, I just on a marathon, ran myself into the ground, and I just got slower and slower and slower and slower and slower. And then I jumped on a plane and I went to Paris. And this guy wanted to run 3 hours for the marathon. Anyway, he fell off pace, like, pretty much about maybe 5 miles in, 8 Ks in. And we're getting slower and slower and slower. And so we were coming up to halfway, and he said, I'm done. I'm going to stop at halfway. And I said, well, do you mind if I keep going? And he said, no, knock yourself out. So we went through the half. We meant to go through the half in an hour 30. We were like an hour 41 or an hour 42. And I just went bang. And I ended up running the second half in an hour 12, an hour 13. Does not sound impressive, right? But when you have to pass thousands and thousands and thousands of people zigzagging all the way in, it was really like a 68-minute effort.
Now you know what it's like.
But I ran myself into the ground. Yeah, like I mean, I still broke 3 hours. Like, we were on 3:20 pace. Like, I ran the 3:24 pace. I ran like half an hour quicker in the second half. But I still wasn't happy. I was still angry. I was like, just so, like, I was running on the death of John. Like, I was just, and even when I crossed the line, I just wanted to hit something. Then I jumped on a plane and I flew to the Gold Coast because I was doing the commentary. So I was like, LA back, Chicago back, Paris back, Queensland back. And I was going for a run. It was like the second day I was there. I was going for a run on the Spit. And I can't remember if it was a 30 or 40-minute run, but 15 minutes out or 20 minutes out. And I got to the turnaround point and I went, I do not like this anymore. And I stopped and I walked back and I never ran again. Wow. And that was the end of my running, of fitness and loving running and wanting to enjoy running. I had blood clots, I had medical stuff, and I never ran again. And a couple of times I tried to run, but it was just too hard. I was also then accumulating a bit of weight, which it's fine. I don't care. I was working around the clock and I was comfortable. I mean, my racing weight was 56, but I'd got up to like about 90 kilos. Obviously, 56 was unhealthy. Maybe 65 was good, but 90 certainly not good, and maybe 75. So trying to find the line in the middle there. But in December of last year, I don't know, I'd retired from coaching. There was like a little bit of a piece of me that I felt died. That, like, I used to train and there was blood, sweat and tears. But when I was coaching, I demanded blood, sweat and tears, right? And so I feel like I was getting a fix through my athletes and I just wasn't getting that. And I was putting on races, but we don't have like elite athletes. So I was just like, you know what, I think I'm going to try to get back into running. And so I said to my boys, I said, would you guys like to run with me? Which they were super keen on. And so that was my why. Yeah. Why am I going to run? Well,
it's a bit like repeating your childhood.
Exactly. And it's sort of like been this whole thing over the last 8 months. But look, I could only run 10 minutes. I was like struggling. I was hurting. I was trying to sort of build up, and it sucked. Like, and I was just like, I need to embrace the suck. And it was like December, January, February, March, April. Like, I'm 6 months in, and I said to a friend, I said, I can't friggin' believe this. Like, there is no improvement. I am not improving. I was getting frustrated, but I was determined. I wasn't enjoying it, but I was like, I am determined to do this. Like, I'm getting to run with my kids. And I don't know, just something seemed to click. And then running has got a little bit easier. Like, I only run 2 or 3 times a week. I'm sort of, I can average 5-minute Ks, 8-minute mile pace. I can't go to the well. I'm just fearful of what damage I may do to my lungs. So everything's on the flat. It's not up a hill. It's not hilly. It's not trails. It's not a workout. But anyway, I've sort of got to the point. I was like, you know what? Why don't I try a workout? So last Tuesday, I think it was 7 years, 4 months and 11 days since I'd done a hard workout, which was that Paris Marathon.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to try a workout. So the group that I used to coach, Team Boulder, they're still going. So I met with them and I jumped in and I did a workout, and it sucked, but it was a good suck. And I was like, all right, my competitive days are gone and I'm never going to be able to get the best out of myself again. But it goes back to that point where I talked about, if you're sick, the effort you would get would be 50%, right, compared to 100% that you'd get if you were healthy. But as far as effort goes, even though the result is only going to be 50%, you can still give 100% of your effort. And so that's where I am with this thought process. But look, I've changed my diet. It's a lot of salads. I don't eat fried food, fatty foods, don't have sweets, don't have takeout. The only luxury I've kept is beer. I don't do spirits, shots, wine, because you've got to have a vice, right? And a lot of people cut everything out and they drop in weight and then they get miserable and they go back up again. For me, I was like, I'm going to do this organically. I'm going to do this authentically. So, I've gone from 92 kilos to 78. So I've lost,
Congratulations.
13 kilos.
That's awesome.
I'm not doing big miles. It's just,
but it feels good.
I think I can eventually do a little bit more, right? Like, I do 35 minutes comfortably. The other day I did a 45-minute run. Once I can maybe get up to an hour, that's when I'll start to see more weight loss. You don't see a lot in that 20 to 30 minutes, right? You're just starting to activate the body, but you're not burning the calories. The calories come when you start to really deplete yourself and suppress, right? That's where the calories are burnt. I'm not at that point yet, but with just some life changes and stuff like that, it's been great. But it was just, I'll do this with the kids. I just thought that if I'm driving in the car and I'm driving down to the troop loop with my boys, the stuckness is worth it to be there with them. And that's just how I've sort of got into it. So I'm not running for sheep stations. I'm running to just challenge myself a little bit. I know I'm never going to be what I once was. So it's a different norm, which I'm trying to not accept. I've already accepted that, but I'm trying to embrace, to enjoy. And who knows what happens over the next 6 months. But, provided I get to continue on this path that I'm doing at the moment, I will continue on it and, have some fun. I mean, that's pretty much it. And when I put that post out, some people read into it that's too much, that it's like, oh, my God, you're like, oh, we're thinking of you. Like, no, that had nothing to do with it. All it was that, nearly 8 years ago, I got kicked in the nether regions. Life was tough. Because a lot of people say to me, why don't you run anymore? And no one really knows about the multiple blood clots that I've had. Or then I get, oh, gee whiz, who ain't Lee Troop? God, man, you're looking a bit big. That paddock must have treated you pretty well. The typical things that people say that, honestly, like, you laugh it off, but you go home and you feel like a bucket of shit. You do. You feel, you think, hang on a second, like, we're always good about this, are you okay? Always check on people. But then we hang shit on people, right? It's just, so it's taken me a lot over this journey to be comfortable with myself, be comfortable with where I'm at, be comfortable with who I was, who I've become. And all that post was that 7 years, 4 months and 11 days later, I actually did a workout. And the reason why I haven't done that was because I was in a shitty place. I've had to work through some stuff. I value all of those challenges that I've had. And I'm now just trying to find a new challenge, and I don't care if I'm going to be successful at it. I just want to enjoy it. So that was it in a nutshell, and I'm happy with where I am. So hopefully that just gives insight to people as to why my life turned out the way it did. And I also feel like that I've had a lot of private messages I honestly didn't think that it was going to blow up like it did.
That's crazy.
And the people that have told me their torments, like their issues, their problems, and saying thank you. I didn't do this for a moment to stand on a platform to have people go, oh, yeah, thank you, you're speaking for us. It was just me. It was my moment with how I felt after that run. And it just gave insight to the struggles I've personally had over the last 7 years. But I've never bitched about it. I've never complained about it. It's life. Everyone's going through something. Everyone's got a battle, right? I'm just giving light to, I've come out of my battle and this is where I am. But just the volume of people that have just said thank you, for them to realize that we all have bad days, but Lee Troop has had bad days and Lee Troop's come out of it the other side. And what he's presented himself on social media has always been this dad. He loves life. He loves his coaching. He loves his events, but maybe sometimes behind those closed doors, there's been a different side of Lee Troop that he hasn't been happy with and he's been a little upset with. And that's true. That's 100% true. And so if people can realize that there's always going to be light at the end of the tunnel and to always look at things with the glass being half full as opposed to half empty, you're on the pathway to overcoming it.
And that's what that post represented to all of us out there, I guess, is like just showing that that's awesome. The case, that the life is not one straight line for most of us. We all have ups and downs. Yeah. And as we've said a lot on the podcast, to me, and to most people I speak to, running's been actually a path to helping through some of those ups and downs in life. Just for you, some part of the interesting bit of the story is that the running was a part of some of the stuff that was causing you issues earlier on, when you stopped.
That was my torment.
That's so it's kind of an interesting
getting into running,
twist on the whole thing in my head. It's like
running's going to help you mentally and physically, and I'm like, it's not. It's actually my torment. It's what's frustrating me, And so I'm a big believer that you got to do things because you want to do them. And even though this has been a pretty challenging process to get back, and I'm not proud of it. Like I said to someone, I would run at 5 o'clock in the morning so people wouldn't see me.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. And I was not comfortable in, people have always seen me as Lee Troop the athlete, Lee Troop the runner, always looking fit, always looking
identity
great.
Thing.
But I'm out there and I'm looking like a sloth and like a hippopotamus. And I've never been someone that's cared, but I started to become very conscious about it. And I was just like, I really want to try to get back into this, but I just don't want people looking at me and I don't want people judging me. And so I'd get up at 5 a.m. and I'd go down and do it. And I'd come back, and I wanted to wait till I'd got to a point where I felt comfortable before I'd even bring the kids in, and I'd do it in public.
Wow.
Right. And so me starting in December wasn't a very simple thing of I just went out there and ran. I did a lot of that in the dark, away from everybody, because I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I had people make me feel that I was embarrassed. Well, that I was embarrassing, right? And so I just was behind closed doors. I fought my own little battles on that. It's not a big deal, but it's just, I think, okay, I'm a very strong person, but what about those people that aren't as strong as me?
It's not a big deal, but it's real. So, you're speaking what people are thinking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you're typing whatever you...
doing that,
it's fine.
Me doing that workout with those people on Tuesday is the first time I've done something like that in a group environment.
Wow.
But it's another step forward in me regaining my own confidence. I mean, like I said, I was comfortable with myself. Yes, I knew I was overweight, but I was happy.
Yeah.
Right. But it really became what people said behind my back and what people were saying to others, that then I got to a point that I didn't even want to hang out with friends. I didn't want to do things socially. I didn't want to go to places. But in my own home, I was comfortable.
Yeah.
But in the public eye, I started not becoming comfortable. And I started like coming up with excuses to not go to events, to not go to things, because I felt uncomfortable because of what other people felt, which is stupid, right? Because
it is, but we know that on reflection.
Shitty, right?
But we're human.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully my stuff resonates with people on two fronts. One, those that lack confidence can actually feel a little bit more confident in themselves, and then on the other front of other people, be careful of what you say. Don't be an advocate for are you okay, but then be a complete person of frustration that then adds to that by saying what you say. All right. So they're the two sort of things, So, and that's why I have a lot of empathy for people, and I'm very conscientious of what I say, because we just don't know what people are going through, and we need to be mindful of that.
No, it's very true. There's a lot of stuff that goes unsaid, unfortunately, which is why it's nice that when people do say, this is what's really going on in my head. And yes, you're not the only one who has stupid thoughts sometimes, and it's fine, because it's all part of being human, you know what I mean? Which is good.
Yeah.
Lee, how long I ask everybody this question, how long do you think you'll run for in your life? Seems like a funny question to ask you right now.
I will run for as long as that I enjoy it. If I don't enjoy it, I won't run. As long as, like at the moment I'm running because it's fun, even though it sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's fun. I'm embracing the suck. I'm getting comfortable with uncomfortable. Like I said, it's baby steps of just getting back. But look, if I stopped running in 2 months' time, that's fine. I'm not in this for how long am I going to run for, or what am I going to get gaining out of it. Just right at this moment in my life, I've found a little bit of comfort in that, and I'm going to embrace it, and I'm going to roll with it. And if it ends up being something 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the track, amazing. If it's something that's only another few months, that's great. I'll try to move on to something else that gives me the why I should be doing it, and then also adds to the purpose of why I exist.
I love it. Your boys are still running? That you said they were?
They're very heavily involved in their football. Max is he's definitely the athlete of the family. Jack's not. He just does it plays football because he wants to be around people. Now, he's got ADHD, so for him it's the worth of acceptance of being in environments. And then surprisingly, I'll say, do you want to go for a run? No, Dad, I don't want to. And then 2 days later, I'll say, do you want to go for a run? And he'll go, yeah, can I come? And so I take those moments with him when I can. And I just hope that, something might give him some joy. He said that he wants to do athletics this summer. Never had a desire to do athletics, but he wants to do athletics. And so I'm excited to, take him down to the track and see what he can do and make sure it's fun. Like, I've got 2 different kids. I've got one kid that for him, it's like the nurturing, the caring, the fun, like, let's just enjoy it. The other one, it's competitive, like, got to win, got to get the most out of yourself, got to be the best football. And I sort of feel like if I could have both of them morph, then I would have the perfect Lee. But I've got these 2 different kids that I juggle, and they're both awesome and great. But like I said, for Jack, this will be a really fun thing for him. So as long as they stay involved, my daughter occasionally runs, my wife will come occasionally. As I said, there's no predicted component to this. I'll just do it while I still am currently enjoying it.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Lee, I've taken heaps of your time. I really appreciate it. It's been awesome to learn more about you. I really enjoyed it. And
thank you.
The journey you've been on is amazing. To get a little bit of insight on what it's like to be a professional athlete. Most of us don't get to experience that or to find out just how hard it is. We can only imagine. So thank you for giving us some insight into that. It's been great. Really looking forward to the Geelong Marathon coming to fruition and seeing how that goes and getting lots of people involved. Good luck with it. I'm sure it will be a smashing success for the years to come. Before I go, is there anything about running that we haven't talked about that you want to touch on?
No, I think we've covered the smattering. But the thing I love about running is it doesn't discriminate. It brings people of all ages, all abilities, all sizes together on the start line. There aren't too many sports that you can stand on the same starting line as, an Olympic champion. It's things that we should always remember, the simplicity of it. It is one foot in front of the other. The objective is to try and go a little bit faster or a little bit further, and everyone's got a story to tell. And I think if we remain in the organic component of what running is and don't overcomplicate it. I always say don't analyze, overanalyze, and then psychoanalyze. Keep it simple. And I think that's what running really is. And so I think that's the thing I've appreciated the most about it, is that working with so many different people, that if you really break it down to that small molecular factor, that's the driving force of why we do what we do, because we can. So Everyone's got challenges. I shouldn't say everyone can, but people that are in a wheelchair can find ways to potentially do, their able-bodied sport components, bring themselves to that. Yeah. So, I just think that, if we keep everything in that realm simple, like when I'm standing on the start line, there's a wheelchair person there. I don't look at them as someone that's in a separate event. I don't look at them as someone that's doing a separate component. Like, unfortunately, they don't have their legs, but they are still competing, and I still see them as a runner. And I'm not being disrespectful, but they're there. Even though they're wheeling, but they're there. They're on the start line of a running race, and they're wheeling. So again, it's like we don't have to discriminate. They're there, and I think it's awesome. So, we should all just appreciate the opportunities that we get, and sometimes we overlook it by overcomplicating it.
We do. Our brains have a lot to answer to. Lee, thank you again. It has been amazing. Don't jump off straight away, but thank you for sharing so much of you. It's been quite inspiring.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zen Run podcast. I hope today's chat left you feeling just a little more inspired to move in your way and on your terms. If you've got a running story you'd love to share, please reach out. I'm always looking for real, relatable stories that help remind us we're not alone, whether it's a big goal, a quiet win, or simply why you keep showing up. I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to share it. Plus, if you're curious about the Zen Run Club, come take a look. It's a low-key space with guided runs, simple training plans, and monthly challenges to help keep your running fun, motivating, and totally stress-free. Until next time, keep running, keep breathing, and keep showing up for yourself.